The last two Vaadim, we were talking about the issue of getting kids to stay in bed after you put them to sleep. We're not going to be discussing that again this evening, but we did receive an email on our email address, which is chinuchvaad123@gmail.com. And the email is such a creative and a practical application of many of the things that we've spoken about that I decided to just begin by reading that email. So I printed it out. Hi. As a follower of your monthly Vaad on Torah Anytime, I heard you discuss the topic of keeping children in bed at night and wanted to share with you what we started lately and is working so far, B'ezras Hashem. We have 7-year-old twin girls. We made them a chart, and each row on the chart has room for 10 checks. When they're in bed by 8 p.m. and do not come out, they earn a check. Each check is worth $10, and a line of checks is worth $1. They can redeem their money whenever they want, and then we cross out the checks that were redeemed. Of course, we encourage them to save up and redeem their checks only when they have a larger amount. If they're not in bed by 8:30, they get a point. By 9 is 2 points. Each point takes off 5 cents. So 2 points means that one check will be taken off the chart. A day that we come home late, the rule is if they're in bed 15 minutes after we get home, they get a check, etc., etc. That's the letter. I thought it was a creative and practical application of things we have spoken about, so I wanted to share that with you. And now for the topic for this evening. Recently, I was at a simcha here in Lakewood, and someone came up to me and greeted me very warmly, whom I recognized, but I didn't remember who it was, and I didn't remember how I knew him. And he said, "Dr. Wikler, so nice to see you. Mazel tov, mazel tov." He introduced himself, reminded me who he was, and of course I remembered. He said, "You know, something you said to me 27 years ago made all the difference in the world and changed my life forever." I said, "Whoa, it's not every day somebody says that to me." So I said, "Please forgive me. I don't remember 27 years ago what I said to you. Could you remind me? It must have been something very valuable. I'd like to know what it was." So I'll tell you. He says, "I was dating my wife, and I was very serious, but I couldn't make up my mind because there were a few things that bothered me. I mean, they don't bother me now," he said, "but they bothered me then, and I was kind of indecisive, and it was schlepping a bit. And my wife said that at that time she couldn't put up with this any longer, and she gave me a deadline, and I had to decide one way or the other. And I was so indecisive, I didn't know what to do, so I spoke with you, and you listened to me, and I told you what my sveikas were, and then you asked me one very important question. You said, 'Tell me something. When you have to make other major decisions in your life, is it difficult for you also? Or just this one is difficult?' I said, 'Are you kidding? Every major decision I have to make, I can't decide. It's hard for me.' He says, 'Well, then at least you know it's not about her. It's about you.' And I came home after I spoke with you, and I realized you're right. It's not about her. It's about me. I have to step up to the plate and deal with my own indecision. This is ridiculous. I'm indecisive all the time. I'm trying to clear about her. It's not about her. It's about me, that I can't make up my mind.' I decided the next day I'm going for it. I called her up. I proposed. And bli ayin hara, the last 27 years, I've been very, very happy with my wife. And then he introduces me to all of his children, K'nayin hara, and I had the nachas to see his beautiful family. But what that episode drove home for me, Rabbosai, is that taking personal responsibility is extremely critical in maintaining shalom bayis, accepting personal responsibility. It's not always an easy thing, and sometimes it's a challenge, but it's very, very critical if you want to establish solid shalom bayis based on trust. Now, we have a very clear example of someone who didn't accept personal responsibility right away in the beginning of the Chumash in Parshas Bereishis. Pasuk says, got the right pasuk here. Adam Harishon ate from the Eitz Hadas, the pre-Eitz Hadas. HaKadosh Baruch Hu confronted him with his Aveira and said, Did you eat? Did you eat from the fruit of the Eitz that I told you not to? And what does Adam Harishon answer? Vayomer Adam Ha'isha she'nasata imodi hi nasna li min ha'etz v'oichel. He wasn't accepting full personal responsibility. He was blaming Chava. Now it's true that Chava gave him the fruit, it's true. But he didn't take his own personal responsibility. Now, a little while later, there was another major Aveira that took place. That's when Cain killed Hevel. And when that happened, Kadosh Baruch Hu confronted Cain as well. And he said, Vayomer Cain el Hashem, Gadol avoni minaso. Is my sin so great that you can't bear it? And Chazal say that Cain was doing tshuva. Now it says right after that, Vayetze Cain. There's a famous Medrash that I'm sure many know, but it's good to have Chazor on it. It's Medrash Rabbah, Bereishis Rabbah, Perachov Beis. The Medrash says, Vayetze Cain, Pagabo Adam Harishon. After this encounter with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, when Cain accepts responsibility, at least partially, for his Aveira, he meets Adam Harishon. Amalei, ma nasa bedincha. So Adam Harishon said, you also transgressed. So what punishment did you get? How did it work out with you, with the Kadosh Baruch Hu? Amalei, Cain answered his father and said, Asisi tshuva b'nispasharti. I did tshuva. I accepted personal responsibility for my actions, and I plea bargained. Now, originally he was supposed to be Nov and Nod, and the pasuk says he went to Eretz Nod. And the Chazal say from here we see that his punishment was reduced as a result of doing tshuva. His skill, Adam Harishon. So Adam Harishon heard that. You, Cain, accepted personal responsibility for your Aveira. And as a result, you were able to plea bargain with the Rabbanu Shalom? So the Medrash says, Hitzchil Adam Harishon mitapeach al panav. He slapped himself on the face and said, I can't believe it. Didn't realize. Vayomer, and he said, Kachi koicha shel tshuva. That's how much power tshuva has, that you can reduce your sentence. Vani lo hayisi yodeya. And I didn't even realize. I never realized how important it was to accept personal responsibility. Miyad, immediately, Amar Adam Harishon got up, V'amar, and he said, Mizmor Shir Liyom HaShabbos. Said the capital Mizmor Shir Liyom HaShabbos. What does it have to do with what happened? Because what's the next pasuk? Tov lahodos la Hashem. Lahodos has two meanings. It can mean to praise. It can also mean to admit, to acknowledge, to be moida. Adam Harishon was moida that he did an Aveira. He had done an Aveira, and he realized the tremendous koyach. Now, we've said this many times, Rabbosai, and I'm going to say it again tonight, that certainly we know that many mitzvahs and many inyonim beidanam l'chaveiro, in part, are designed to teach us how to work on our relationship beidanam l'makom. But the learning curve works the other way as well. And many issues bein adam l'makom can teach us how to behave bein adam l'chavero. And just as it's important to accept personal responsibility bein adam l'makom, Adam Arishan was shocked when he realized how important this was, and he composed the whole kapitel Tehillim Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbos. We say every Shabbos, Tov L'Hodos. It's so wonderful to be able to admit and take responsibility for yourself. The same way as it's important in our relationship b'inen l'makom, it's very, very critical b'inen l'chavero to accept personal responsibility. Now I want to cite an illustration, a more current illustration. It's a couple that I was working with not too long ago. They came for marriage counseling. What was the issue? What were they coming for? The wife felt that her husband was completely irresponsible. She couldn't trust him. He would say he'll take care of something and he never did it, and he'd say something was so and it wasn't that way. He was unreliable and irresponsible. In general, she felt she couldn't trust him. And one of the issues, not the only one, but one of the major issues was that he was somewhat overweight. He had borderline high blood pressure. Exact numbers, I don't know what they were, I don't remember. And he also had a bit of a sugar problem. Now, he wasn't diabetic, Baruch Hashem, but his father had been nifter from a diabetes-related illness, and he had a cousin who also had diabetes, and it clearly ran in the family. And she was simply worried that he wasn't taking care of his health properly. And she was nervous about it. She felt insecure. And she didn't trust him that he was doing what he needed to do to safeguard his health. Now, the husband, on the other hand, said, listen, he doesn't have diabetes. Yeah, it runs in the family, but he doesn't have diabetes. He's meeting with his doctor for regular appointments. He follows his doctor's orders. She's being nervous for nothing. She's being overly anxious about it. And they kind of went back and forth on this issue. The wife said, listen, if you want to know what you could do that would instill trust in me, I want you to go to a specialist. Go to an endocrinologist. Ask him if you're doing everything you need to do. Then I'll feel reassured. The husband says, an endocrinologist you go to if you have diabetes. I don't have diabetes. If my doctor felt I needed to go to an endocrinologist, he should know better than you. He's a doctor. I don't see your medical degree. If he didn't tell me I have to go to an endocrinologist, I don't think I have to go. So what's this whole Narishkeit for? Well, they were kind of going back and forth on this, and they were really stuck on this issue. At one point, the husband turned to me, and he says, what am I supposed to do here? I don't have diabetes. I'm going to a doctor. My wife says she doesn't trust me. What can I do to get her to trust me? So I said to the husband, why don't you go to the endocrinologist anyway? Tell him that your wife is worried. Let him check you out. If you don't have diabetes, if you're doing everything you're supposed to do, if he feels you're doing what's necessary to safeguard your health, tell him to put it in writing. You bring that letter back to your wife, and that'll settle it. This is what a wonderful idea. So I'm going to do that. Could you recommend somebody? I recommended somebody. Fine, he's going to go. He said to me, now, I may not get an appointment right away. Let's not schedule another appointment for next week. I want to make sure I have that appointment with the endocrinologist before we meet again. I said, fine, we'll meet in 2 weeks. Okay, great. 2 weeks later, I saw the couple. So, of course, the first thing I asked the husband, did you make the call? He said, yes, I did. I called. Did you have an appointment? Not yet, but I made the call. I said, okay, good. When did you call the endocrinologist? He looked at his watch. 20 minutes ago. I said, 20 minutes ago you called the endocrinologist? 20 minutes ago? I had to catch my breath. I said, this is how you're demonstrating to your wife that she can trust you? You called 20 minutes before our appointment? Could you tell me, why didn't you call sooner? You had 2 weeks. We left 2 weeks, so you should be able to take care of this. So he felt a little bit on the spot. And he said to me, look, it's not that I didn't care about it. not that it wasn't important to me. The truth is, I just forgot. And anyway, if it's so important to her that I have to keep this appointment with the endocrinologist, in the last 2 weeks she could have reminded me. I said, she could have reminded you. I had to catch my breath a minute. I said to him, listen, we had discussed your meeting with the endocrinologist because your wife said she doesn't trust you. And you were telling her that she could trust you. And you wanted to prove it to her. And you turned to me and said, what can I do to prove to my wife that she can trust me? I said, you can make an appointment with the endocrinologist, meet with him, let him evaluate you. If you don't have diabetes, you're not under any risk, he'll write it in a letter and you show it to your wife and that'll take care of it. And you said, it's a wonderful idea. You're going to prove to your wife now that she can trust you. And first you forgot, and then you expect her to remind you? Well, it's important to her. Why can't she remind me if it's so important to her? I said, let me ask you something. Supposing you didn't trust your wife because she wasn't making you supper, and you felt she wasn't doing her wifely responsibilities, and she apologized and said, okay, from now on she's going to stop making you supper. And you said, okay. And we said, we're going to not have an appointment next week. We're going to wait 2 weeks. We're going to come back and see how things are going. 2 weeks later, I turn to you and I say, tell me, Beryl, that's not his name, but Beryl, did your wife make you supper this week? No. Whole 2 weeks, she never made me supper. I can't trust her anymore. And your wife turns to you and say, look, if it was so important to you that I make you supper, why didn't you remind me? Would you feel that she's trustworthy? He looked down at the floor. He shook his head. He said, I get your point. I get your point. Rabbosai, it's very easy to shift blame and shift responsibility. And we have a good example. Adam Arishan did that when he blamed Chava for his act of eating from the Eitz Hadas. But that doesn't instill trust. And the Kadosh Baruch Hu punished Adam Arishan and cursed him. B'ezras Hashem tochel lechem. Cain, on the other hand, accepted personal responsibility. And he was able to plea bargain. He got his punishment cut in half. If we want to instill trust in our spouses, then we have to accept personal responsibility. Now, after that session that I just described, later that night I got a phone call from the wife. I thought, oh boy, I guess it's over. They're not coming back. They're canceling the next appointment. They're calling now, it must be. Picked up the phone. The wife said, Dr. Wikler, we're coming for our appointment next week. But I didn't want to wait till next week to tell you thank you for today's session. Finally, I felt someone understood what I'm putting up with, what I'm dealing with. He never takes responsibility for anything. He's always shifting the blame. It's never his fault. It was somebody else's fault. I'm supposed to remind him. I'm supposed to be responsible for what he's supposed to be responsible for. Finally, someone understood what I'm dealing with. And I think maybe, I'm not sure, she said, but maybe you got through to my husband. Now, we weren't finished. It took more work, and it wasn't so simple, and I was just encapsulating a long process in a short description. But I just wanted to illustrate how critically important it is for shalom bayis and instilling trust in a spouse if people are able to accept personal responsibility. You made a mistake, you did something wrong, you hurt somebody, you left something out, you didn't fulfill a responsibility, you were inadequate in some way. We're all human. And we can accept each other's imperfections and frailties. But when you try to shift the responsibility and make it someone else's responsibility and say, you should have reminded me, it's not my fault. It's your fault that you didn't remind me. That means what's your responsibility is your responsibility. And what's my responsibility is also your responsibility. So how much trust does that instill in your spouse? If it's your responsibility, then it shouldn't be your wife's responsibility to remind you. It should be your responsibility to remember yourself. Your wife doesn't remind you to put on tefillin. Your wife doesn't remind you to daven mincha. then your wife shouldn't be reminding you to do what you told her you were going to do, and then you just forgot your anoinus. So I'm just underscoring the importance of accepting personal responsibility in marriage, in our relationship with our spouses. And if we do, B'ezras Hashem, hopefully we'll be able to instill trust, and you won't end up in my office like that couple did. I just want to announce before we end that B'ezras Hashem, the next Vaad will take place in 4 weeks, which is July 16th, B'ezras Hashem, and we will be returning to our original venue. We're making a change. We're going to be meeting where we started out in Sterling Place, which is one Gila Place in the downstairs Sterling Place Shul, which will follow the 10:05 Maariv. We'll have a Maariv at 10:05, and the Vaad will commence as soon as Maariv is over. Have a good Chodesh, and thank you for coming.